In this video now, we will look into how we can recreate the rough plastic surface as well as simulating the fabric surface. The fabric will be easier to do, so let's start with that one first. And when we go to our Roku project folder online inside textures, there you will see one matte fabric wire bump. This image we want to use. Our timeline, we switch to the shader editor because that's easier to work with as nodes than actually trying to do this inside the list view. To create this structure, which is called bump mapping, we need a bump function. So add factor bump, and then we connect this one to there. Nothing really changed, well, because we don't have a texture yet assigned. So add texture and then image texture, connect this. Now we have to load the image. Click open, desktop, Roku, textures, fabric bump, open. And there we see it. Okay. So what does the bump mapping do? To give you an idea, here I set reflectivity down to 0 right now. And then here the strength I set to 0. And you see that it creates kind of like a shadow structure on the surface that gives you the illusion that the surface is woven. But if we really pay attention to it, it's just a visual effect. And besides the shadow part, it does the same also with highlights. So it manipulates the highlights, and this way it gives you the feeling, wow, that surface is really structured. So it's a pure visual illusion. It's fake, but from a distance, looks very convincing. Same like here. If we want to adjust the scale of the bump mapping, we need to scale this image. There are 2 steps involved: texture coordinates and factor mapping. The mapping really helps scaling, rotating, and moving the texture, so vector to vector. Then this might happen because we also need to tell how this image will be mapped. We will use UV. UV comes actually with the Fusion OBJ export by default. What UV is, I will explain in a later video. Very good. And then we can set all this maybe to 2 or 0.1. You see that actually adjusts scale to maybe 1.5, so it's not too fine. Okay. So again, to explain what all these commands do, the texture node establishes how the image will be projected or will flow over the surface. The mapping node will give us the tool to do the scaling. The texture node, well, it gives us the ability to load the image. Bump mapping defines then how strong is this bump effect. We can keep this at 1, or for example, set this down maybe to 0.5, so it's not super strong. And then that is being fed into the normal input, which takes care of, well, creating this bump mapping effect. And that's it for the tag for the moment. We will later at one point go revisit, rebuild this tag, and do this a little bit softer, because I don't really like the sharp edges. They're kind of like stupid. We want this better. Okay, so how do we do this smooth surface? Right now, this looks super soft and blurry, but that's not the way how it is. It has a structure. Particularly, that's the prep work also for creating the structure on the remote control. So let's click the base and we'll go to plastic structure. Here now we do the same. We need a texture image and we need the bump. Connect this and this. Nothing really is happening because we don't have an image loaded. So open, desktop, Roku, texture. Here is this image, one matte pattern. And there we are. This is actually the same texture Fusion uses. I just copied it out and we can adjust the strength of the bump mapping by here, for example, being very gentle with the values. 1 is actually really strong. 0.1 is pretty good. Yeah, there we are. Now we would like to scale actually this effect. We have to do the same. We need to have a texture coordinates and we need to have a mapping UV there. Let's say 2 or 4. There we are. Okay. What we have to now pay attention to, however, is the creation of visual artifacts or more array patterns, and also the image being tiled. So you can see here right now the more array effect, and that's because the image has a detail that is finer than the amount of pixels my physical display has to show it. When we go to output, have this set maybe to 300, so we 3 times as big. Wait a second. There we can see this issue. Let's set this to 100. Do this again. There, you see the more array effect is different. So the resolution is really also key here. But you remembered even with a bigger image that there was a tiling effect. And then when I zoom in a little bit, based on the distance, I can start seeing there the tiles. So that can be the problem of an image that's being repeated. If the left does not meet the right edge and the top does not meet the bottom edge, because then it means the image is not seamless. So what I'm going to show you and what I would like you to use is a secondary approach. Instead of using an image, we actually use what's called a procedural texture. Procedural texture means it's a math function that creates that effect or structure. So click Add, Texture, and instead of image, we will use Musgrave, however that's pronounced. Before I continue, let's disconnect this and let's plug this one in there. Zoom out a little bit, and there you see the look. It also flickers a little bit, so this image I move up and I add this one to the vector. And I can set this all to 1 if I want to. Oh wait, hold on. I can do it that way, or I can even Shift-D, make a copy this over. There we are, because we have a scale actually built in here. Woo! And there is the scale effect. You see, I'm not zooming in or zooming out that image. I just changed the size of this effect. So it's mathematically calculated, which means I can zoom in as much as I want. It's always super sharp, unlike an image that will be pixelated. Okay, so for these type of structures, this bump mapping done via procedural texture is actually always giving you the better result. So let's move this one to there. This I kick out. Then I could connect color to height. Go to the camera. Now here we can play with the effect a little bit more. Can adjust the scale more based on how we want to do this. We also have ability to play with detail too. And when we do a rendering, so go 300. Come on, there we are. There you see it. We don't really see that tiling effect. That's a nice part of these procedural textures. Okay, and that's kind of like the crash course into bump mapping using image or procedural textures.